You don't hate your job. You hate what's staying there. Says about your life. And that changes everything. Because most people are not trapped by their work. They are trapped by what leaving would require. That is your first truth. Many people don't stay because they love their job. They stay because change threatens their identity. Think about that. If you quit tomorrow, what else would have to change? Your routine, your excuses, your story, your future. And suddenly, the job is not the problem anymore. The life around it is. That is why people stay for years. Not because they are happy, because they are familiar. And familiar feels safe, even when it hurts. That is your second truth. Most people don't fear bad jobs. They fear uncertain lives. Because certainty can be miserable. But uncertainty can expose you. And exposure is terrifying. What if you fail? What if you regret it? What if you're not capable? That is where fear hides. Not inside the job, inside the questions the job protects you from. Because as long as you stay, you never have to find out. And not knowing often feels safer than discovering the truth. That is why some people complain every day for 10 years and never leave. Not because they are trapped, because complaining is more comfortable than responsibility. Read that again. Complaining creates relief. Change creates risk. And the brain prefers relief over risk. That is your third truth. Most people do not stay because leaving is impossible. They stay because staying sounds reasonable. Every year, they find a new explanation. The market is difficult, the timing is wrong, the economy is unstable, the risk is too high. And maybe some of that is true, but fear sounds smarter when it speaks through logic. That is the trap. Because the longer fear survives, the more logical it sounds. That is why people say, I just need a better opportunity. But what they often mean is, I need certainty before I move. And certainty never comes. Because certainty is not how transformation works. Transformation begins when certainty ends. That is the part most people avoid. You tell yourself, you are being realistic. But are you? Or are you using realism to disguise fear? Because repetition can make fear feel like wisdom. And logic sounds safer when it protects, what you're afraid to lose. That is your fourth truth. The longer you stay in a life you already outgrew, the more expensive comfort becomes. 1 year, then another, until eventually, you stop dreaming. Not because you became realistic, because you became adapted. And adaptation can look a lot like surrender. That realization hurts people, because deep down, most already know. They knew years ago. That is your fifth truth. You do not need permission to change your life. You need honesty about what you already know. Because the hardest truth is this: the job was never the prison. The prison was the story that told you you couldn't leave. So what changes now? You stop asking, how do I find the perfect opportunity? And start asking, what am I protecting by staying where I am? Because the answer to that question is usually the real reason you haven't moved. Want more truths like this? Subscribe now. Most people avoid hearing them because most people would rather adapt to a life they secretly hate than risk creating one they actually want. In the next episode, we'll expose why you didn't become tired, you became a machine. This channel isn't here to motivate you, it's here to help you see differently. And people who see things differently don't watch once, they stay.